The final push in Australia was the biggest day on the trip so far. Huge milestone to get through Australia.
So the transition from Australia to New Zealand went really well. We hit the target, we arrived in Brisbane, flights, everything went smoothly. Tim and Fleur were here with the vehicles all set up.
So I met the team in Brisbane. I got there the day before, and without fail, the Menzies support to help us on the ground has been immense. Like, I've never seen anything like it. It's made everything so much more efficient. I mean, we landed, and from actually sitting on the plane, on the tarmac, to Mark getting onto his bike was like 15 minutes in Invercargill. Like, it was ridiculous.
The spare bike at the airport, no dramas with that. One of the local guys from the local bike shop in Invercargill, he was there. He had some tools that we could use as well.
Quickest and slickest yet.
Successful, I'd say.
We had the help of Adam Scott. Adam met Mark 10 years ago, I believe, when Mark was cycling around the world.
It's amazing how many people from 10 years ago, the first time I cycled around the world, have come back out and helped again. But over and above the actual logistical support is just great moral support, you know.
We came out of the airport and Mark was riding and did 50 miles on the first day, the first evening, which was a real bonus.
I'd always been pretty worried about New Zealand. I thought it could be the worst of the winter weather. The middle route through the island had a good chance of being snowed in at this time of year.
He's had a couple of really tough conditions of strong headwinds and gusts up to 35 knots and hammering rain that it's just really bitter to sort of see and watch him go through it. But
it was seriously cold, having difficulty sorting the bike out because everything was freezing.
We've got full Gore-Tex stuff to really keep it. You know, it's the best stuff you can get for waterproofing. It doesn't last 16 hours. So the point is we have stuff all lined up on the heaters on the front of the vehicle. Or when he comes in from his 4-hour blocks, dry him off, talcum powder, clean clothes, and hot drinks, and then stick him back out on it again.
Big climbs for Mark, big days.
So that first day climbing up through the ski resorts, you know, past Remarkables, past Wanaka, coming over Hast Pass, crazy descent, gravel in the corners, just dropped to the west coast. It was pretty exciting.
If Mark could maintain quite a high average speed, then there was a potential for catching a ferry, the last ferry in the evening, which would get us into North Island to catch a flight onto Anchorage. The consequence of all of that basically means that potentially we could be leaving New Zealand a full 24 hours ahead of what's actually in the programme.
I was slightly struggling with my headspace. I think it was just the fatigue from the end of Australia and very little recovery, and then having to refocus on another big target.
Does he push it a little bit harder, which puts him potentially into the red? Versus, but then he gets a load of recovery, or does he take it easier, but then he gets, less recovery later? And those decisions are partly just made on discussions with Mark. How clear is he? How cognitively switched on is he? If he's making quite a clear decision, he's like, no, I'd like to ride on for another half an hour. And I think, he's managing fine. His cadence is staying the same. His power output is staying the same on the bike. He's looking consistent. He's not weaving on the road. He's not falling asleep. Those are the things where, for my decision making, if he's showing any risk of safety, then without a doubt I'd pull the pin and I'd bring him in early.
The toughest conditions to deal with are when it's nearly freezing, high winds and rain all at once. And we had that. So as I came around Nelson on the South Island, I got absolutely battered. There was some gusts coming in that pretty much stopped me on the bike. That's the only point on the trip so far where I thought, this is crazy, and I'm probably gonna have to stop. But then in contrast to suddenly pick up a tailwind, the sun came out and to fly. This gorgeous valley down through the vineyards, and to turn the corner and to ride around to Picton and the ferry was just a dream. I mean, actually I ended up getting there with an hour or so to spare. But it just shows you, if you persevere, your luck can change. Got 3 hours sleep on the ferry. I was kind of hoping that first 100 miles out of Wellington, which is flat, would be fast riding. Could I make Auckland in basically just over a day and a half to get a day ahead of schedule? There's a section of pretty busy dual carriageway just north of Wellington, and it was dark. There was headlights coming the other way, there was lots of glare, and my light I just didn't see, and the front wheel slipped out, and I went sprawling across the road. But I got a fright and I was sore, my knee was cut, my hips bruised.
We rolled off and dropped the bike down on the drive side, so we bent the mech hanger. So I didn't have the tool to straighten it, but with all the spares, put the mech back on, run through the gears, and everything was perfect and as it should be.
I ended up riding basically for 20 hours. I started at 4 o'clock in the morning and it was 10 to midnight when I clocked 400 kilometers. And the amazing thing about the final ride through New Zealand was how many people came out and joined me. It was amazing. I mean, by the time I rode into Auckland itself, there was like a peloton with me. I mean, just to finish leg 2 in style, just to remind us that this was the winter leg, the heavens opened and we had a heavy hailstorm, like proper angry hail. But it was pretty cool to ride into Auckland with a local crowd, to have that support and realise that, we've done it. We've cracked leg 2 and yeah, I've suffered a lot, but done it in style and heading up here to leg 3.
If he can now just do 3 weeks of constant, consistent, sort of just churning out the mileage and starting at 4 o'clock, finishing at 9:30, getting his 5 hours sleep, then absolutely happy days, because I think that's what you can do.
Flying up from New Zealand to America is, fantastic. 2 long flights, recovery, time off, and getting a day ahead of schedule.